All right. Hello and welcome to Mommy Consults. This is really a space where moms are healing through trauma, really so that they can pass down a generation of wellness. And my guest today is Angel McNeill, a wonderful therapist in Florida, someone I have known for over 10 years. I think we're going on like
Going on 20, I think.
gosh. Yes, I've known you for so long, but I think we have both seen like the evolution of us as therapists. And one of the things that we have seen is like this evolution of spirituality,
Yes.
which is like, I don't know about you, but I feel like it's this word that's like, I don't know if I want to say it's like a dirty word, but it's like a word that I think people have a lot of opinions on.
Oh, for sure.
And why, I
Absolutely.
don't know, why do you think that they have like all these opinions? And do you see that?
Oh, of course, because it's like I think it's loaded, right? Like, and when I say that, it's because I think it's really hard to define. Like when you and I were in college together and we would get talked to about spiritual wellness, I always left feeling like, okay, but what exactly is that?
Agreed.
And so for a lot of people, maybe they're coming out of institutionalized religious backgrounds where they kind of had this very rigid structure put on them when they were young. And then when you start breaking away from that, it's like, well, I left this thing that told me all the answers. And now, all of a sudden, there's all this possibility. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really what comes up for people when they hear the word spirituality is that there's so many opinions and there's so many ideas. And it's like, which way do I go? Which is right?
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. And I feel like it kind of goes in like, what's the definition of wellness? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you really want to call it? And everyone has their opinions,
Yeah.
and everyone has their opinions. But I don't know about you, especially as therapists, what we're taught in school is that the client defines that for their own self.
Yeah. And I think that when it comes to spirituality, I think that's the only way you can go. I think it's such a personal, individual journey that
Yeah.
that when I'm working with my clients and I'm trying to help them explore this, I have to be really mindful not to put too much of my own belief into that conversation because I don't want to unintentionally influence them in a way that doesn't work for them or doesn't make sense to them. So
Yeah.
then you throw in the fact that it is such an individual thing, and that can be overwhelming too, because it's up to me to decide. Shit.
Right. And then like I feel like then it's like either they want to give up and then they're like, I'm just don't want to address it.
Hmm.
Or it's like then it becomes this exploration. So if they're willing to, it becomes this exploration into their childhood and what they learned. And then what does that look like present day? And then like
Hmm.
what do I want for my future? So it's
For sure.
like I always feel like it's like this journey that our clients are on.
Oh yeah. I mean, and not just them, right? Like we're on that same journey too. Like if you think about what you used to believe versus what you believe now, and then what you may believe in 10 years, that's this evolving thing. So I think that spirituality in a lot of ways is kind of a living creature of its own.
Mm.
And as we grow, as we age, so do our understandings of our values, of our ideals, the things that we hold above ourselves, right? I think of it a lot as when I'm living my life, when I'm just going about and I'm acting out in this world, what are the values I'm holding myself to? Am I living up to those values? Am I being authentic and living up to those values? Or am I still living up to values I think I'm supposed to because that's what I was raised to believe? And it's this nebulous thing where sometimes you think you got it. And then there's going to be days where it's like, I don't know, maybe I was wrong on what I was believing.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. You're talking about values, but I'm wondering like if someone watching this is like, well, it's not about values, it's about like the deity. Is there God? is there, like, you know what I mean? I think it's like you're like definitely talking about values, which I totally think are important. But I think about like religion, like our organized religion, and I think about Christianity. I think about Judaism. I think about Islam. And then I think about, you know, I don't know, Hindu, like Buddhism, like all these like labels
Yeah.
that people use is, in my view, is like language. So we're trying to figure out language, but then we have things like atheism.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like are we looking at spirituality as like looking at a deity and looking at God? Or are we looking at it as though like it's our behaviors or our beliefs or our values? Or is it both?
My answer to that is yes. Like, I would actually put spirituality as this big umbrella, and I would even put atheism underneath it, because I think of it as a way of understanding our place in this world and our environment around us. Whether you believe there is nothing beyond us, or whether you do believe that there are deities or spirits or higher powers, and all of that comes down to, and I do think that values are completely enmeshed with this. I don't think you can really separate it, because when we're looking at who am I, why am I here, you know, what's my purpose, all of those things, I think that's where values really do come in, because we live our life based on the things that we value. We
Yeah.
make our decisions based off of those things. We will choose jobs, choose spouses, choose friends based off of those things. Even things that we engage with for fun come
Yeah.
back to the things that we value or think are important. And so maybe you're your highest authority, right? Maybe there is nothing above you, or maybe there is something above you, but it all comes back down to you identifying how you fit into this larger framework.
Yeah. And I want to say this because it's like almost like I want someone to kind of for a moment understand like the therapist lens.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're essentially trained to be with clients, all different types of clients.
Yeah.
And so like if our client walks in and they are like atheist, or
Mm-hmm.
you know, they're a certain religion, or like it's not our job essentially to be like, hey, let's steer you like this way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
Yep.
that's why, and I think that's just so important, because then you take away that value and that belief that that person is trying to identify with. And that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Some people agree with that, some people may disagree with that,
Oh yeah. And
because
that's when, like, when we're talking about spirituality, we can only speak from what we believe that to be.
yeah.
Right. And so it's like when that person comes in and maybe they have a completely different conception of the word, it's important to be in their wheelhouse, right? It's what is your belief about spirituality? How is that important to you? How can you embody that? What do you need help with that? It has nothing to do with you know, our personal relationship with our own spirituality, which I think can be challenging for all therapists, because like, well, what is that? Where's that line exactly? How do I
Mm-hmm.
know if I'm engaging with them based on their spiritual beliefs and not my own?
Yep.
And you know, we're all human, and sometimes it's going to come in the room.
Yeah. And we're also trained to like really make sure that we consult with like ourselves, consult with others, like
Mhm.
to really check ourselves, to be honest, as we should be doing. Like, you know, to check ourselves to say, like, okay, if this comes up, you know, what is the reason why?
Yes.
Because it does happen. Sometimes you do have a client that, you know, may have a totally different belief system or value system on that umbrella of spirituality, and you kind of have to figure out, well, how do I lead this client
Yeah.
to their goals and what they really want? So
Mm.
it's you know, totally different
Yeah.
experience that I think you know, you only kind of really know, I do think, unless you've had an experience as a therapist or training, because it's just you kind of have to have that openness with
Yeah.
clients.
I think it's it's being able to leave your, you know, little suitcase at the door that's full of your stuff, And that doesn't mean that we're never affected by what happens in the room, but that it's ultimately not about us. And that's when we're coming back to spirituality. That's kind of one of the most important tenets, I think, is that your individual experience is not about anybody else, and theirs is not about you. And it's not your job to make them believe whatever. It's not their job to make you believe whatever. I mean, we have a lot of that going on, right? This idea that there are people who are experts and they know the answers. It's like, ain't nobody know. Nobody knows. We're all
right?
trying to figure it out.
Like, what is going on?
And so, it's why it's always kind of funny to me when people want to argue about spirituality. It's like, why? What are you doing? You're just going to exhaust yourself. And so it's taking that same kind of approach and recognizing that you can believe something that I think is totally crazy, but it doesn't matter. It's not my life to lead. And I think it's important that everyone has the opportunity to lead the life that they think makes sense. Whether I think it makes sense is not part of the equation.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, like, how do you do that specifically with your clients?
Well, I think a lot of it is, again, kind of that approach of maybe unless they believe something that I think might directly cause harm to them, right? I can fly off a building. No, you can't. Let's talk about that. That aside,
you're safe. Let's make sure you're safe.
Exactly. But if they're telling me that perhaps they don't believe in God at all, right? And I'm not an atheist, so that's not necessarily where I follow, then what I'm going to do is explore, what does that look like for them? How does that play out in their world? What are the challenges that they face with that? Right? Maybe the challenge that they face is that they're an atheist in a household of Christians. And it's like, well, how do I help you maintain your right to believe what you believe in an environment where maybe you're constantly being challenged? How do you want to handle those challenges? And I ultimately think that talking about spirituality, because it's one of those things that I really do believe permeates all areas of our life, right? Like, again, using someone who's an atheist as an example, that's going to determine like how you conceptualize yourself. What's your standpoint from what you believe is around you and how you will interact with people based on those things. And so my job is to make sure that I'm helping that person in the same way that I would help them in any other topic. It's like, what are the challenges you're facing? How can we help to empower you to face those challenges? Where are there areas where maybe you have a little bit of irrationality going on? We all do, right? We all get in our own way. How are you self-sabotaging? And doing basic therapy work, I guess.
I know. Yeah. So, I mean, pretty much like you're putting spirituality still, it's into the framework that you would use in other areas of wellness. So we have like other areas of, like physical wellness, our intellectual wellness, things like that. It's still treating it the same way. I'll be honest, like this is probably a little bit of a struggle sometimes for me because spirituality is it's really ingrained in my life, like, every day. I'm not saying I'm not going to ever be perfect, but it's something that I use on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I believe in it. And I often feel like the experiences we have like within our body are very spiritual.
Yeah.
And so, I say it in my call, like my introduction call, like I'm very blunt. I'm like, this is who I am. I will have you touch your heart. I will have you like, I'm woo woo. And I'm going to like do all these things that make you feel like you're in touch with your body, in touch with like, and essentially that's what I view as spirituality. So being in touch with your body, being in touch with that intuition, whatever the language you want to use for yourself. But it's a big part of my practice and a big part of who I am. So I have had times in the past where I'm with clients who that is like, they do not align with that. That's not their, they're maybe more of a logical mind. And they're like, how do I analyze like everything? And I'm like, get in your heart center. and it's, but I think over time, I don't know about you, I've learned to be okay with like, this is the type of therapist that I am.
Yeah.
And I do know tons of therapists who may align more with what you need. Yeah. And I think that's the hard part right now, I think, in terms of therapy, because when you first start in therapy, you're like trained more on, we want to help a broad group of people because we are often in mental health centers. We are in, I've worked in hospitals, like, worked in a lot of places where you kind of need to have that. But I think once you work in like private practice, it becomes a little different and a little more specialized.
I do agree with that. And I think, as you were talking, my first thought is, well, that's when maybe that's not the best fit, right? And that's kind of the beauty of therapy, is that it's so important for the individual to find someone that they click with, right? It's not just about making sure that you like the person, but that they can meet you where you're at. And we all have our limitations on this. And no therapist should ever hesitate to go, I don't think I'm the right fit for you. Because ultimately it's about that person's needs. And so, I've absolutely had similar experiences where my conceptualization of things, right? Like when I tend to think of spirituality in terms of meaning and purpose, right? And it's not to say I don't get woo-woo with that. I do. You know that. But it's a lot of kind of going in that direction of maybe some of those heavier hitting questions. And there's going to be people who are like, no, I don't want to do that. And my job is to either go, okay, I can recalibrate. And if I can't recalibrate, then I need to refer that person to someone who I think would better serve them, because that's ultimately the purpose here.
Yeah. I think, you put it right, like right there, is that it's really about the client. It's about the client's experience, and just taking, like, we're here and we're that guide, but understanding that that client is really guiding that spiritual experience.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I could talk to you all day long about this. Angel is a therapist in Orlando, Florida area. She is in person, which I think I've been contemplating that. I don't know, thinking about it. So, but and you are EMDR trained, so that's also like another. I always feel like I think it's a spiritual experience in some ways.
100%. 100%. I think it's anything that helps people to heal from their trauma. Definitely a spiritual experience.